What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Primetime podcast. It's all about Resident Evil 3, my all-time favorite video game. And that's a spoiler for those of you who didn't get to hear my top 5 video game podcast, like my top 5 all-time games. I did that with my friend Dion. He also did his top 5. So if you haven't heard it, still go back and listen to it, even though I spoiled my 1 for you. But you can still find out what 5 through 2 is. So check that out for sure. If you're new to the Primetime podcast, you can subscribe by many different platforms, just to name a few. You can check me out on Anchor, on Google Podcasts, Spotify, even over on my YouTube channel. Subscribe to me there. The link should be in the description below, along with the great sponsor of Primetime 21st Gaming, Catalyst Mints. Check them out. The link is in the description. Like I said, you can get energy mints, energy powders, apparel, shaker cups, just all around a lot of stuff over there at Catalyst Mints. Check them out through the link in the description below. And without further ado, let's talk some Resident Evil.
September 28th, daylight. The monsters have overtaken the city. Somehow, I'm still alive.
Alright, so I go on a Resident Evil kick a few times a year, actually. And the last time that I played Resident Evil 3 Nemesis straight through was back in January. I did a stream, no commentary, just chilled, played through the whole game. I believe it was a snowy day. You know, because after you beat the game and you play through the Mercenaries mode, you can actually get unlimited ammo, which I had done. I did an unlimited ammo run and just annihilated everything, and that can be fun. Once you get the unlimited ammo. But I did that for a stream, and I still love this game. I've really grown to love it for the GameCube. Because I when I first played Resident Evil 3, I always had it for the original PlayStation 1. But before we get into all that, I just kind of want to get away from Resident Evil 3 for just a moment and talk about the other games. Let's start off with Resident Evil 1. It was the first one that I ever owned, and I didn't get it until '99. So Resident Evil 3 Nemesis had already been out, but it was my, first take on the series itself. And I don't know what it was. Just something that drew me into the game, because I've never been into zombies. The whole zombie thing was never for me. It still really isn't. I've always been a fan of horror movies. I love the Michael Myers movies. We're not going to talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween movies. Not a big fan of those. But like the classics, Halloween 1, Halloween 2, Halloween 4, all the Halloween movies I pretty much like. I mean, some more than others, but I love all horror movies basically. That when I was growing up, I really enjoyed a lot of them. And this was my introduction. Resident Evil 1 was the introduction to survival horror video games for me, and it was for a lot of people. And I mean, yes, some can say it was Sweet Home, but not everybody got to play Sweet Home. And there's a lot of things taken from Sweet Home and put into Resident Evil. But like I said, not everybody got to play it. So this was the start for a lot of people. I was just late to it. I was late to a lot of things. But so yeah, I was 6 years old when I got this game in '99 and wasn't very good at it. I got to roam the mansion, a good bit. But all the way up until, some of those puzzles, those are hard for a 6-year-old. And so some of the rooms I never got to explore because you need you got to get the keys to unlock. And but I did get to play a good bit of it and roam the mansion. And the environment was just terrifying. Wondering what was on the other side of each door, because you had the door loading screen or the transition screen from going from one room to the other, and just wondering what's on the other side. So I started off with Resident Evil 1. I didn't get Resident Evil 2 until many years later. Actually, the truth is I never saw it out anywhere. Resident Evil 3 I ended up getting. We'll get to that with my first experience with it. And this may be controversial for a lot of Resident Evil fans, but I'm sorry, Resident Evil 4, I believe, was the decline for the series, and it started to mix that action in with horror, and I don't know, I can't do that. Uh, for example, there are some TV shows and movies that will mix horror and comedy, and I really can't find anything I like of that. I did enjoy the first season of Scream Queens, which was, horror and comedy, but that was really rare for me. I don't know. I just kind of want it to stick with horror. If I want to watch a horror movie, I want to watch a horror movie. If I want to watch comedy, I'll watch comedy. And if I want to watch an action movie or play an action game, I'll play an action game, watch an action movie. But that was honestly, I feel like that started the decline. Resident Evil 5 was just straight garbage in my opinion. When you put the name Resident Evil on it, you lose me there. Was it an actual garbage game? No, I'm exaggerating. It's like a Gears of War though. It's a Gears of War knockoff. I say that, and it's just full of action. I'm not a big fan of it. Resident Evil 6, it was better than 5. And then Resident Evil 7, I believe, got on the right track again. And you're not gonna make everybody happy. You're gonna, there's the ones who are like, oh, Resident Evil 7's not Resident Evil. It doesn't feel like Resident Evil. Well, neither did 4, 5, and 6 for me. But, at least we got back into the horror aspect of Resident Evil. So I was happy with 7. But like I said, you're not gonna make everybody happy. You're just not. And, I enjoy the first 3 Resident Evils. I even enjoy Resident Evil 0. Code Veronica's good. I enjoy those games. But I don't know. It was like 4 started the decline for me. Maybe you love 4. There's a lot of people who say Resident Evil 4 is the greatest Resident Evil. I don't see it, but maybe you do. And like I said, this is all my opinion. So don't come at me and try to say that I'm stating fact. I'm not. It's just my opinion. So that leads me to why Resident Evil, the first 3 Resident Evils are my favorite, and that's because it's horror. The Resident Evil movies came out, and they were very successful, and they were more action than anything. So they're like, okay, well, let's take our movies and work them into our games, and I don't know, it didn't work for me. But the first 3 Resident Evils were scary. And when I'm playing, like I said, when I want to play a scary game, that's what I want to play. I want to play something scary. And that was what those 3 games were. And the reason Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is my favorite is because I think it's the most terrifying. So let's start getting into that. The original plans for Resident Evil 3, before it was Resident Evil 3, were to feature the character Hunk from Resident Evil 2, the 4th Survivor mode. And it was to feature Hunk and a boat and something about the vibe. I don't know. Something way off from what we actually got. I mean, we did eventually get a Resident Evil game on a boat, and that was Resident Evil Revelations many years later. But the first experience that I have with Resident Evil 3 was a demo. And that demo was on a copy of Dino Crisis, and I did have Dino Crisis pretty early in '99. I'd say close to the time it released, and I remember playing the demo. And the demo, for those of you who are familiar with Resident Evil 3, the demo leads you all the way up to the police station where you have the encounter with Nemesis and Brad. Once you run into that whole thing, and I think you choose to either fight Nemesis or run from him. I think that's where the demo ends, if I can remember right. But yes, you got to play all that in the beginning, where you burn the rope, all of that, where you meet Brad in the bar, all that kind of stuff. You got to play through all that, all the way up until that first Nemesis encounter. And I remember playing that thinking, holy crap, I need this game. And one day I came across it at a local game store that we have here in town, and my mom purchased it for me, and I was so excited. I even got the strategy guide with it, and strategy guides were huge back in that time. You now you can go on YouTube and watch playthroughs, which is convenient, but I still love a good strategy guide. I still collect them from my favorite games, and I a lot of these as I got older and I got the strategy guides for the original Resident Evil 1 and uh all the Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, I was able to get through these games where a younger kid probably would struggle. So, strategy guides are awesome to me. I still love them. But anyway, I love the original story of Resident Evil, where it starts in the mountains, and then it makes its way into the city. I liked that. For those of you who don't know the story of Resident Evil, there's a podcast that I had done in the archives. It's like the backstory or the story of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, and I basically read the timeline and stuff like that. So check that out if you haven't. Now, the game takes place just months after the events of Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 2 and 3 are actually happening at the same time. And a lot of people have tried to pinpoint, who gets to the police station first, who is the, or why don't they cross paths, Jill Valentine and Leon or Claire, why don't they? It's honestly complicated, and it doesn't make sense. You can't even try to figure it out. There are things that, okay, for example, if you start Resident Evil 2 and you go all the way to the police station without picking up an item, and I always start as Leon, so I do play with Leon first. So if I don't know, I don't know how many people prefer the other way, but when I'm talking about playing Resident Evil, that's how I start off. I always use Leon first, Resident Evil 2. But anyway, you go all the way to the police station without picking up any items, and you can find Brad as a zombie. So that's the beginning of Resident Evil 2, which would lead you to think, okay, well, Jill had been at the police station first because that's where Nemesis kills Brad. But when you get there with Jill in Resident Evil 3, a lot of the doors are boarded up. Well, they're not boarded up in Resident Evil 2, when Leon's in there. So I don't know, that's really weird. A lot of people think that when Jill gets infected and you have to take over Carlos and go to the hospital, that's when Resident Evil 2 is taking place. That's when the crash happens, all that kind of stuff. But then again, that doesn't make sense because when you're playing as Jill and you're in the police station, you can actually find Marvin already dead from his scene in the same room where Leon has to kill him, where he turns into a zombie. But I don't know. It's very confusing when it comes to that. But I would have thought, with the Resident Evil 2 remake, because you almost have to think we're going to see a Resident Evil 3 remake. You have to. I love all the Resident Evil remakes, 1 and 2. Both great games. But I was really hoping that at the end of the credits, or at some point somewhere at the end of the game, there would have been a run-in with either Jill or Nemesis, or even at the end of the credits, just hear Nemesis say stars, just to give you a hint, like, it's coming. You know what I mean? Because we know it's going to happen. Why just do the first 2 and not remake the third? I don't know. But this game, honestly, is such a good game. And the reason that it is terrifying, that is the most scariest Resident Evil, in my opinion. It is very underrated. Everyone says that, Resident Evil 2 is the best one, or Resident Evil 4. You hear those two the most. I think Resident Evil 3 gets overlooked. And I've heard people say that they're upset that it kind of took a step back from Resident Evil 2, where you had 2 scenarios you could play with Claire and Leon. That's not a big deal. It's really not. I mean, yeah, it maybe has more replay value, but it's still a good game. Like I said, I honestly think Resident Evil 3 is the better game, my opinion again. But the thing that makes it so scary, you have Nemesis, who can show up at any time and he'll ruin your plans. If you're trying to figure out a puzzle and you're backtracking to go get an item to make it all the way up to, let's go to the gate in Resident Evil 3 where you have to put the gems in. And you're trying to put the gems in, but guess what? You hear the music, and here comes Nemesis. And the most terrifying thing is he runs. You know what I mean? This isn't like a zombie that just, happens to roam around the street and you can, break his ankles and do a juke on him. This Nemesis is coming at you full speed. And if you're not prepared, if you don't have, if you're low on ammo, or well, first of all, I don't even recommend fighting him. I mean, if you play it on hard mode, you can, if you're able to kill him every time you get parts for gun. Honestly, I never do it because you end up just wasting so much ammo on him. It's best to just avoid him until you absolutely have to fight him in boss battles. So I don't recommend it. But anyway, yeah, when he shows up, you better hope that you're prepared because honestly, you never really are. You're just not. You don't have your maybe you don't have first aid on you. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're limping. Maybe you're already injured, and all of a sudden you hear that music, and you're like, "Oh God, no!" And your mind is instantly racing and thinking, "When did I save last?" You never really feel safe. The only places I believe that you're safe from Nemesis is the lobby of the police station and the save rooms. He can't come in there. So yeah, those are really only your safe spots. And so let me talk about some memories that I have of Resident Evil 3. One specific memory that I have when I actually got the game, like I said, I was young. I wanted to sit down and play it with friends or family, and I did. I sat down with my cousin and her dad, my uncle, and late one night, I've told this story before. I just forget where I tell it, whether it's on a live stream or another episode. So if you're hearing it again, I apologize. But it was late one night, and I was at their house, and we were playing this in the bedroom, and we were sitting on the edge of the bed, and we get into the police station. And we spent a long time. If you ever play a video game with my uncle, let me just tell you how that goes. He loves to explore, okay? I'm the kind of gamer that's like, I want to get in, get what I got to get, and advance the game. Not him. He's searching every room, from corner to corner in that room, he's looking at everything. So we spent a long time in that police station. You go upstairs, you go into the STARS room, you hear the little radio call, and that's when you go back downstairs and you hear a noise. You go down the steps and around that window, boom, here comes Nemesis. I'll never forget it. We all screamed. It was terrifying. And he killed us instantly. I mean, cuz that's a moment where if you're not expecting it, you have to regroup from the jump scare and hope that he hasn't grabbed you and does that weird thing where his hands like foaming and instantly kills you. So but man, such a great moment that I have to remember as a kid with this game. And this is my all-time favorite game. It's just not my favorite Resident Evil game. It's my all-time favorite game, and that goes back to my podcast episode that I did a few back with my friend Dion. We did our top 5 favorite video games of all time, and I'm sorry, I just spoiled my number 1, but still, if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to my 5 through 2, and check out his top 5 as well. But a lot of people, when you ask them what their all-time favorite video game is, they have ties to it. Usually when they were a kid, memories that they had playing it. Those are usually their favorites, and this is one that I have. I love this game. I don't just I collect for this game as well. Like I have, my wife surprised me one year for Christmas, and she got me this game for the PlayStation 1. Graded. It was graded. She, as weird as this is, you just never really see these out in the stores anywhere, but at a local game store, one of the newer ones that we have now, a couple years ago, she come across it graded, and she picked it up for me for for Christmas, and that is one of my favorite things that I have. I have the Nemesis pop vinyl. My cousin one year got me this little Nemesis statue for the 20-year anniversary of Resident Evil, and I just recently picked up the big cardboard standee that was out in stores for this game back when it was being previewed coming out for PlayStation 1 in '99. And so I was so excited to get that. But this game, it means a lot to me. I love it. I love the memories that I have with it. It's just an all around good game. So another thing that I really liked about Resident Evil 3 compared to the others, Resident Evil 1 took place in a mansion, and then yeah, you got to come out of the mansion, you got to go to the lab, you got to go to the residence, stuff like that. But most part of the game was in the mansion. Nothing wrong with that. It was terrifying, to think what's in this mansion with me. But you were isolated, you were confined in there, basically. And then in Resident Evil 2, you got to see just a little bit of the streets of Raccoon City before going to the police station. It introduced the police station, the iconic police station, and then into the sewers, into the lab, stuff like that. But we still aren't seeing a lot of what we know as Raccoon City. And that's what Resident Evil 3 did. You got to see the streets. You got to, yeah, you made it back to the police station, but you also got to see the cemetery, you got to see the park, you got to see the hospital, many different, locations in this iconic Raccoon City that we've known about from the past two games. You actually got to, walk around and check it out in Resident Evil 3. And that was something I really liked about Resident Evil 2, the remake. We took the graphics from what we once knew and brought the iconic Raccoon City up to today's standards or graphics, and it looked incredible. It was a nice touch for a Resident Evil fan like me, and that's why I'm really excited. Don't know when we're going to get it, but a Resident Evil 3 remake, seeing Nemesis, possibly, we got a taste of it possibly with Mr. X. Mr. X was very Nemesis-like in the remake. Yes, you dealt with him in Resident Evil 2, but nothing like, you do in the remake. And just the thought of, Nemesis. There's people who have modded Resident Evil 2 and added Nemesis in, and man, it looks so good. It gets me so excited. But yeah, I do like the locations and stuff like that. But this game is playable on a few different platforms. Of course, the PlayStation 1 was the OG. That was the one that I had started with. And it released back in November 2011, or I'm sorry, November 11th, 2019 in North America. It was on Windows as well. That released April 16th, 2001. It also released on the Dreamcast, which I don't have the Dreamcast version, but I would like to get that one day and play through it. I don't know how the controls are on the Dreamcast controller, but definitely willing to try that out. But that released November 17th, 2000 for the Dreamcast. And then the GameCube version, which released in North America January 14th, 2003. Now, January 2003 being the last, we're not counting you can also get this like on the PlayStation Store on like the PS3, and I believe possibly the Vita. I don't know too much about the Vita. I know the PSP, of course, you can, put it on there, but no, the GameCube version is the most recent, I guess, port of it on an actual console. I love the GameCube version. I have learned to love the GameCube version. Like I said, I grew up playing the PlayStation, the original PlayStation version of this game, but I love the Dreamcast, or not the Dreamcast, but the GameCube controller. There's just something about it. I don't know. I has it holds a special place in my heart. And playing Resident Evil on it, because I do have even the port of the Resident Evil 2 game on the GameCube, and I've learned to really uh enjoy playing them on the GameCube instead of the original PlayStation. And I mean, the graphics are a bit better, but really, that don't have anything to do with it for me. It's just the feel of the controller, and uh, I don't know. I really do like the layout of the buttons on the GameCube controller. So if I'm gonna recommend that you play this, if you can get your hands on the GameCube version, definitely do it. It's a lot of fun. So speaking of like controls and stuff, let's talk about people complaining about the tank controls for the original Resident Evil games and the uh, the different camera angles and stuff. I thought the camera angles were perfect. It basically took you away from feeling like you were in control, and that's another like thing. That's another small thing that really just takes it, you know, it takes it out of your hands, and it's like this is only what we're giving you. So good luck. And I like that. And then the controls not an issue with me. I mean, it's really not. Uh, the Resident Evil 3 was the first game that introduced the quick turn, which was a nice feature. But you still have those who complain about it. They like the over the shoulder, view the best. And I was never a big fan of the over the shoulder until the remake of Resident Evil 2. But I mean, it's fine either way. I know that every Resident Evil other than 7. I wonder if we'll get a first person Resident Evil again, or if 7 will be the end of that. But yeah, it was. I honestly, it's not a big deal to me. It's all about gameplay, and if it's a good story and I'm having fun, that's what I enjoy. But yeah, I actually see this now. I looked it up. The game is available for download on PlayStation Network for use on both the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable. So I'm assuming that yes, you can put it on the Vita as well. But so yeah, guys, Resident Evil 3, one of the greatest Resident Evil games. I think it is very underrated just because it gets, it gets overlooked by Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. The two games on each end people always talk about. And I just think it is very underrated. I can't recommend it enough. If you love horror games and you're the kind of person that can go back and play an old game and the graphics aren't an issue to you, you're not one of these people like, oh, it looks terrible, I can't play it. Come on. Are you really a gamer? Like that, you're just complaining at that point. You're looking for reasons to complain. Go back. If it's a fun game, which I'm telling you it is, it's got a good story. Go back and play it. It won't be an issue. It won't be an issue. Now, if you're not used to the original Resident Evil controls, you may have an issue. But learn them. I'm telling you, it's worth it. It's worth it. Beat this game. Go out and get it. Doesn't matter what platform. Like I said, GameCube, PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, whatever it may be. Go on the PlayStation 3 and get it. The PlayStation Portable, whatever. Beat it and be ready for when we get that Resident Evil 3 remake. I'm holding on to hope that we're going to see it. Someone asked me not too long ago, are we going to see a Dino Crisis remake before a Resident Evil 3 remake? And I said, probably not. I feel like, Resident Evil 3 is definitely going to get the nod first. But who knows? I could be completely wrong, and only time will tell. Alright, so in closing, I actually had a conversation the other day with a guy who works at one of the local game stores, and we were talking about Resident Evil and which ones were our favorites and stuff like that. And he told me that he really didn't care for Resident Evil 3 Nemesis because of Nemesis. He's like, you don't really get a chance to get away. And I'm like, oh, come on, that's part of the game. That's the scariest part about it. And just if you only had Nemesis show up at boss battles, it's not as scary. I mean, yes, the environment, walking the streets of Raccoon City and possibly you being the only one alive, running into a person here or there, like the one guy that you run into in the warehouse, and who lost his daughter, and that guy eventually, you know, I don't know the fate of him. I don't know if it's ever said. You can actually go back and see that the doors are open where he hides himself, and he's not there anymore. And there's some zombies in there. So in the warehouse, so you would assume that they took care of him. But Brad, you run into Brad, and we know what happens to Brad eventually. And eventually you run into Carlos and stuff like that. But for the most part of it, you are all by yourself. Actually, majority of the game, you're all by yourself. The whole game, and that's, because you always split up. I don't know why horror movies and games do that. They think it's best. Hey, let's just split up. No, that's never a good idea. But anyway, yeah, it's still a scary game. Just roaming the streets, thinking you are all alone. You and the Nemesis. So I do want to see some of the scores that were given for the game, and here are a few. IGN giving it a 9.4 out of 10, which I think is a very good rating for this game. I'd place it at about that. It's not a perfect game by any means, but it definitely deserves a 9.4 out of 10. Let's see what else. Next Generation gave it a 4 out of 5. GamePro gave it a 5 out of 5. Game Rankings an 88%. So yeah, it still ranks very high. I just feel like it's very underrated. It just gets, it gets left behind with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 both being on the ends of it. It just kind of gets forgotten about. But yes, Resident Evil 3, such a great game. Definitely recommend. All right, that's it for this episode of the Primetime Podcast. You can check out the Primetime Podcast on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and my YouTube channel, Primetime 21st Gaming. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't to the podcast. And, go back and check out some of the older episodes that maybe you haven't listened to yet. But who knows what's coming up. I have a feeling that I'm going to be doing eventually an Easter egg episode, talking about video game Easter eggs. I do enjoy video game Easter eggs. They are something I find so interesting, and I didn't really talk a whole lot about it in the Resident Evil 3 game, but just to name a few, you had the Resident Evil 4 promo on the wall at one point when you're walking the streets of Raccoon City using the Resident Evil 2 cover photo, and different Capcom logos hidden in the game. You could also see the fiery car crash from the beginning of Resident Evil 2 in Resident Evil 3. So many different Easter eggs. I have a feeling that's going to be coming up. So if you're interested in video game Easter eggs, maybe I'll do a podcast of that, and you'll want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is at Primetime21st. Instagram is at Primetime21st_gaming. That way, if you have video game Easter eggs that you want mentioned in the episode, when, because that one will probably be live, where I'm actually talking with live viewers who are talking about different Easter eggs in games. And you can send me ideas for maybe different topics you want to hear a podcast about through those, social media platforms. So do subscribe to me on the Primetime Podcast, and definitely follow me on social media. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I want to thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Primetime Podcast, and you'll hear from me in the next episode.